We'll span the gamut, taking a deep dive into the issues from President Trump's big win to the continuing J6 travesty with Nick Searcy on this episode of United Patriots Uprising with Gary Binford. I'm your host, Gary Binford. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. The video version you can find at YouTube, Rumble, Conservative Television of America, the God Family and Country Television Network, and the Rose Unplugged Media Network. Wherever you go, please subscribe, hit the notification button, and it'd be nice if you leave us a rating and a review. There's also an audio archive. The show started audio several years ago. More than 180 high-profile guests are there. If you go to radioinfluence.com, if you're looking for United Patriots Uprising with Gary Binford, the archive, you will find guests such as Morgan Brittany, Ben Carson, Monica Crowley, Tom Del Beccaro, Diamond and Silk, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Carol Swain, Rebecca Friedrichs, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Gene Ho, Kerry Lake, Mike Lindell, Michael Loftus, Brandon Tatum, Judge Janine Pirro, Jovan Hutton Pulitzer, Kevin Sorbo, Herschel Walker, and Naomi Wolf. Just a few of the guests that you will hear if you go to the audio archive, and what they said back then is just as valid today. You know, I'm sure we're all elated that President Trump won and will be back in the White House where he belongs and help to start turning America around again. But the war continues because you still have two warring ideologies. So this isn't going to be a picnic because the left is not going away. You can see that right now. And there are a lot of things that have to be corrected. We're confident that President Trump will work to get the job done, but we're going to have to do our part. What do I mean by that? And what are some of the issues? Well, Nick Searcy knows what they are. Several of his movies have dealt with some of these critical topics. So you ready to find out? Well, let's get into it. He's been a consistent presence in American film and television for almost 20 years as an actor and filmmaker. A guest several times previously when this broadcast was audio. I am very happy to welcome back to talk about the state of the nation, his movie, The War on Truth, and his book, Justify This, the one and only Mr. Nick Searcy. How are you, Nick?
Good, Gary. Good to see you again.
Same here, Nick, and I have to say this: between you, Kevin Sorbo, and Morgan Brittany, you've been on a minimum total of 14 times on this show. I thank you all. And previously, it was all audio, so this last time around, now it's video. And I found myself, not as much with Morgan, but with Kevin, expecting in the back of my head, sooner or later, he's going to say, "Cut, Gary, repeat that line." And I'm sitting here saying, is the director gonna come out at Nick and say, "Oh, cut, change the camera angle, repeat that line"?
No. I get paid a lot of money for directing, so I can't. I'm not going to do that for free.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. So now I can exhale. Nick, happy days are here again for the moment, because we know, but it's not. This isn't the end. This is really the beginning, because now the war starts, because we still have two warring ideologies, and we're going to get into that. But what did you expect in the election? Did you get what you expected? When do you know Trump would win? And then how did we get in this mess in the first place to even be in the position where we were concerned about losing the sovereignty of our nation as as freedom and liberty would apply?
Well, I had a feeling that the polls were wrong. I could not believe in my heart that it was as close as they kept saying it was. I kept saying to people over and over again, just manufacturing these polls to make it seem like it's close enough so that if they are able to steal it, it'll be believable. You know, that the whole thing about Kamala being a viable candidate for the presidency of the United States, I just thought was ridiculous. And so I was expecting Trump to win, but what I was not expecting is the margin. I did not expect that Trump would win the popular vote. But then when you look back, it all makes sense because he campaigned everywhere. He campaigned even in places that he wasn't necessarily going to win that state, but he brought his margins up so much, even in places like California and New York, that it gave him the popular vote win, which really cut the sails of the left, because that's always been their argument. You know, they've argued against the Electoral College and all that, and to have Trump not only win the Electoral College, but to win the popular vote really set us on a good path, I think.
I agree with you. And he came here at least several times. He was in the Bronx. He was at Madison Square Garden, which is 40 minutes from me. And he came right here to Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. I can walk there. I was at that rally. The energy was incredible. We had 19,000 inside the building, as many as 40 or 50,000 outside the building. It was an incredible event. And just seeing and meeting patriots, all day long was just a wonderful thing for me. And I realized, that there's a lot of people that love him in New York. But I have to ask you this question based on what you just said. Yeah, I think they have to be. This is going to hurt them to the extent they can't say it was stolen and this and everything because he won the popular vote. But Nick, why was it even close? I mean, why should this have even been an issue when you have a party that actually ran on murdering their babies, rights for LGBTQ, did I leave a number out? Yeah, and climate change? I mean, why wasn't it 99 to 1? I know it's not, but please break down what is the problem in this country that she could even come that close?
Well, I think the biggest problem is, of course, the propaganda media. I mean, the media has been propping up the left for the last 30 years, and it's gotten worse. Since Obama was elected, ever since that, they have been totally all in on 100% propaganda all the time. And you can tell by, if you try to talk to somebody on the left who was a very, avid Kamala Harris supporter, and you ask them why, all they can say is that Trump is Hitler and Trump is a convicted felon and Trump did this and Trump did that and grab them, all the usual cliches. It's all about hating the other side, and that's 100% the fault of the propaganda media. I mean, I even have family members that are disowning their families because they voted for Trump. And that is 100% due to the propaganda media constantly saying, if you vote for Trump, you're evil. And if you vote for Democrats, you're good. And that's why I think it was so close. Propaganda is effective. It's worked in other countries, and that's why they continue to try to do it.
Okay, you've been at this a long time, and you part of that Hollywood, you know a lot of people. So here's what I don't understand about propaganda. Why is it effective? Because isn't it only effective because people actually want to believe that side of the propaganda? Because we get propaganda all the time, but if it's something that I don't want to believe or I'll look into it to find out if it's true. It's amazing to me they pull this off, like from 2 points. Well, Trump is Hitler. Trump won't step down. Well, look, he already governed once, and look at how the country was. The terrorism was gone. The world was at peace. The prices of everything went down. You got rid of all the gangs. Everybody, even the people that can't stand him, their 401ks went up. We already saw how he governed. When he stepped down, he already stepped down once before, even though he knows the election was stolen. So why are people buying into this? Is this part of that thing about wanting to believe what you want to believe?
I think it's more sinister than that, Gary. I think really what happens with the propaganda is designed for the person who believes it. It's kind of a narcissism thing. You're a good person if you believe this. And so for a lot of people on the left, let's just say it, a lot of people on the left don't really operate from a place of faith in a higher power
Right.
a lot of times. Not all of them, but most of them, let's say, a lot of them. So if you don't have that sort of a barometer on your life, then you're going to accept this idea that in order to be a good person, you have to vote for the correct party or you have to believe this line. So there's a certain narcissism in it, in that the lie is designed to make them want to believe it, because if they don't believe it, they really have to inspect themselves. They have to do a lot of work. They have to do their own research. And
Yeah.
it's easier to just say, oh, MSNBC said he's Hitler, and I know that I'm on the right side because I agree with the people on MSNBC.
Yeah, and we talk a lot on this show about the genesis of all this, and going back to, well, we do talk about Karl Marx, but we're deep steep into Antonio Gramsci's cultural Marxism and changing the mores of Western civilization through the language. And you can even see it in this election and over the last few election cycles, where it used to be abortion, and then oops, ultrasound proves it's then it became women's right to choose. And now it's women's reproductive rights. And that just sounds a lot softer. They change all these words and make all their issues seem logical on the surface. Has that been a big part of the media pushing this and pushing these narratives?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you hear it said a lot, this is not just a political battle that we're in, this is a spiritual battle. And I think that's really what we're seeing here. If you look at what the left focuses on, abortion, trans children's rights, I mean, that is a step beyond abortion. It's not enough to just stop people from having babies. Now they're trying to sterilize our children, because what happens when you enter that trans hormone therapy, chemical castration, you're just basically not able to have children anymore. And so that's why, I mean, to me, it seems obvious that this is demonic, that this is not necessarily a place of logic that they're coming from. It's very destructive, and it's also very seductive. You have control of your own life. You're not beholden to any higher power. You can do whatever you want and we'll just fix it. So I think that's really what we're up against. It really is bigger than just, Trump versus Harris. It is a spiritual battle that we're in.
I perfectly understand what you're saying. Most people, or almost everybody that's watched this show, knows I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, born again in 1997. And the Bible makes it very clear, if you just go back to the book of Genesis, that God made two covenants with mankind. After Cain killed Abel, the sanctity of life, you cannot murder. And when he married Adam and the woman and named her Eve, one man, one woman, the two shall become one flesh. Ever since that, everything that Satan has done has been aimed against marriage and against life and the family and the nuclear family. And when you look at the left, when you look at Black Lives Matter, when you look at everything that they're standing for, it goes strictly against the covenant of life and the covenant of marriage. And it totally boggles my mind that people have gone down this rabbit hole. Yes, Hollywood has led the charge. Now, go back to when you started in the industry, and how has that changed?
When I started as a regional actor. I lived in New York City for 7 years and met my wife there, but, mostly did plays. I didn't really get started in film until I left there, moved back to the Southeast to North Carolina. I started getting small parts there. So I built my career up, from the ground up, starting in North Carolina, where the politics were not so divided in North Carolina then as they were in Hollywood. So by the time I sort of got my career going after Fried Green Tomatoes, which was sort of my big break, as they say, I didn't know that it was not acceptable to be a conservative. So I just, I never, until it was too late, I just kept running my mouth, and then everybody knew. So I figure I'm just going to have to ride it this way. So, but yeah, it has become much more contentious than when I first started in the 90s when I really came up in 91, 92, 93. And, you could have reasonable discussions with people on set about Bill Clinton or whatever. After Bush, that in 2004, that changed everything. And then when Obama was elected, then it became like, okay, you're an evil person if you're not for Obama, you're a racist or whatever. And so at that point, it just became like, okay, we can't really talk to each other. We'll have to just talk about the weather or what movies we've seen. We can't really talk about anything in politics on the set because we'll all get in a fist fight. So.
Were you able to change any minds and hearts? This was so difficult. I probably I've been involved in this since 2000. Maybe through the show, a lot of people, but as far as personal people and friends and everything, it's been under 10 over more than almost a 25-year period to get them to see the light. How much success have you had?
Well, it's been anecdotal, and I have heard from people that have gone out of their way to call me up, and these are not like personal friends of mine, but people that I've worked with, especially during COVID. I think COVID opened a lot of people's eyes in Hollywood because they were preventing actors from acting from working if they didn't want to take the jab. And so I heard from a lot of people back then who would call me up and go, I know we disagree on a lot of things, but I'm never going to vote for another Democrat after this COVID nonsense. I said, good for you, buddy. So, I've heard from people, a few people over the years, but I can't say that I've converted anybody in a one-on-one conversation. Hopefully, just by being public and making these films that I've made and showing people that you don't have to be afraid, hopefully that's made a difference.
I hope so too. Well, that's a perfect segue because we want to get into your films and your book. But before we get into your films, I wanted you, to spend as much time talking to you. So if I had to say all your roles and who you played in your movies, and the show would be over, I'd say, hi, Nick, thank you, good night. So tell the people a little about your career and who you've been and what you've done, and then we'll get into The War and Truth.
Well, probably the role that most people would remember me from is Justified, the television show Justified, which I did for 6 years. That was a huge thing in my life. But I've been very fortunate through the years. I've worked on a bunch of different series. I've done quite a few films. Castaway with Tom Hanks is a big one. The Shape of Water won Best Picture in 2017. I was a part in that. And I did a series about the Apollo astronauts for HBO called From the Earth to the Moon that Tom Hanks produced. Those are kind of the biggest highlights of my mainstream Hollywood career.
But what possessed you to get into documentary filmmaking? And boy, I'm glad you did, because you've been involved in some wonderful films, and what you're doing right now, The War on Truth, the latest, it's terrifying, because I know a lot of people that, like you do, we understand what really happened on January 6th. And Chris Burgart was on the show here about 3 or 4 months ago talking about the film, and you guys are passionate about this. Why did you get involved on this particular cause, and tell people about it?
Well, I've made my first documentary in 2020, I believe. It was during the height of COVID. It was called America, America, God Shed His Grace on Thee. And it was a film I was commissioned to make by the Western Conservative Summit because they couldn't have an in-person meeting that year. So they offered me the opportunity to make that film. I made that one, and
with a great cast.
Yeah, great cast.
We even had one of my favorite pastors, Jack Hibbs. You're at his church. Jack's been on the show. I love Jack.
I met a lot in that movie, and it was well received, and so we showed it at another gathering, something policy. I can't remember the name of the group, but we showed it somewhere. And at that time, it was right after January 6th. And Chris and I had gone, not with the idea of making a film, but just, I just wanted to be there and see what happened. And we realized that what they were telling us on television about that day was not true. And so somebody at that screening came up to us after it was over and said, if you could make another documentary, what would you make it about? And Chris and I said, January 6th. And they said, how much do you need? So that's how it came about. And then we set about making Capital Punishment, which was the first one we made. It was released in 2021. And then since the oppression by the government against these people has not stopped, we decided to go ahead and continue to tell the story of what they're doing to these decent Americans. And that became The War on Truth, which was released in May of this year.
And give the people the premise of the movie, of the documentary, anything you would like to tell them about it, because a lot of people go, what do you mean the War on Truth? They have no clue that this has been going on. You can go back to the 30s or even before, and it's just been systematically moving the football almost to the point where they're ready to spike it in the end zone.
Oh, yeah. Well, the War on Truth came about. In one of the interviews, we interviewed my personal favorite pastor, Rob McCoy, and he was talking about how this is really not necessarily just a war on Christianity. It's a war on truth. The left wants to control what the truth is. And so that's what you see. That's what we reveal in the War on Truth, is like how much the lies have been used to advance a political narrative, that these people have been jailed, imprisoned, called domestic terrorists. Most of the people that we profile in the movie are January 6 defendants that have never been arrested for anything before in their lives. And suddenly they are classified as these domestic terrorists that are too dangerous to even be let out on bail. And that is a narrative that's advanced by the left, because the only way they win is by demonizing their opposition. It's like what we talked about with calling Trump Hitler and everything. They have to sell this idea that these are violent, crazy right-wingers who tried to overthrow the government on January 6th. And none of that is true. Not one of that is true. And so The War on Truth is a movie that tries to shed light on who these people are and what the government has been happening and what the government has been doing to them.
Okay. I know where you're coming from, because Chris has been on this show. David Sumrall, who I personally know, who has a ton of footage. Tim Rivers, who have talked to all kind of people involved. And we know the truth. Are you shocked to this point? It hasn't come out. We know Mike Johnson has a lot of footage that hasn't come out yet. Are you hopeful that when or if this comes out, this is going to change the narrative? Because it seems to me, the media in particular, everything that they try to pin on Trump as Hitler all goes back to them believing he called for an insurrection on January 6th, which they know he did not, but they're able to run this narrative because to this point, there's nothing to prove otherwise.
That's right. Well, the next big fight for me, I think, is to have Trump make good on his promise to pardon the January 6 people, because this whole thing has been a setup. The oppression of these people continues. They're trying to arrest as many people as possible now, even now, before Trump takes office. A friend of mine, an actor in California named Jay Johnston, he got sentenced to a year in jail. And all he did was catch a police shield that was being passed back through the crowd, and he passed it along to somebody else, and they call that assault with a deadly weapon. You know, these are the lies that are being told about these people. It's being done on purpose. It's being done to intimidate them, to cause fear, and to send a message: don't ever resist us again. And so the way, I think, even more than exposing all the footage, which should have been done long ago, I think the way to do this is to pardon them all and let just destroy the narrative once and for all. These people do not deserve to be in jail. They do not deserve to have their lives destroyed, their businesses ruined, and being dragged through the court system. And if President Trump needs to pardon every single one of them, I don't care what they did. It was all a setup. Even the people that did some violence, things like vandalism and things like that, they were provoked into doing it. And that's what we show in The War on Truth. The Capitol Police were intentionally provoking the crowd.
Right. Now, here's my concern. If he pardons them before the footage comes out, there's going to be a lot of people in the media, if they're still around, will be in a position to say, see, we told you he's Hitler because he's pardoning all these insurrectionists. But if the footage comes out first, America will go, oh my gosh. And then they're going to expect a pardon. See, can he pardon them without people seeing what you've seen, what I've seen, and to have the truth come out? Because when this comes out, and it eventually will, because as you know, the truth always rises. When this comes out, then America will expect a pardon. And if he pardons them first, they're going to say, okay, they said Trump caused an insurrection, he's pardoning his buddies.
Well, the left is going to do that anyway. They're going to,
even with the footage.
Yeah, they're gonna re-edit it, argue that this is a fake. They'll argue with it no matter what he does. So what I tend to focus on is that these people are sitting in prison, suffering. Their families are being destroyed every second that goes by. That they are in there for something that they should not be in jail for. Maybe a fine, but not even that. And my consideration, I think it's an emergency. I think we have to get these people out in order to save their lives, to save their families, and let the left go crazy. They're going to go crazy anyway. They were crazy last week. They're all shaving their heads now because Trump won. It's like they're going to do that no matter what Trump does. So I say ignore them, let them have their fits, pardon all these people, and then make them explain why the people should be in jail. Let the footage then support the fact that he pardoned them.
I hear you. Nick, every movie you make gets pushed back. This one, so every time we talk, you're like, I can't believe they're doing this to me. How bad is it? How bad is the pushback and on the War on Truth? And, well, I'll let you talk.
Well, you can't find it with a simple search. You really have to be able to type in warontruthmovie.com. If you do a search for Nick Searcy, The War on Truth, you get nothing. You might get a podcast, that I'm on where I'm talking about it, but you're not going to be able to find the movie. And that's what they do. That's what they did with Capital Punishment. The first one we released, you could not find that with a simple Google search. They suppress it. And, we are so limited in our outlets, places like Amazon won't take it. There's no way to get it out to the public except by directly, offering them it on a website. So that's propaganda. They don't want anything to show up that could refute their narrative. And that's what the movies that I've made, it refutes it directly. And they have to suppress it in order to keep their propaganda going.
And this is what Trump and Elon Musk are talking about, as it revolves to is free speech and how things are being suppressed. And a lot of times, the problem with free speech is you don't even know that somebody is saying something because it's like a voice shouting in a forest because it doesn't get to the people. So to put a bow on the film, and then we'll go to your book. What is the one thing you want people to know about this? The one reason they need to get this and watch it and pass it along to their friends?
I want people to see the film because I want them to see who these people are that the government is calling domestic terrorists. We profile so many of these victims of the government oppression, the January 6th narrative, and we allow you to meet them, and you see them reporting to prison. You see them saying goodbye to their children. You see them in their churches where their congregations are saying goodbye to them. These are wonderful, decent Americans. Many of them are veterans. Many of them are really the people that make this country what it is. And that's why they are the targets of this government. These are people that believe in the Constitution, people that believe in individual liberty and freedom. And the most important part of the War on Truth is you get a chance to see who these people really are, that they are throwing in prison for 7-8 years for being at a protest in Washington, D.C. on January 6th.
And the only reason I wasn't there was too damn cold. I'm a heat guy. I'm a sun, water, beach guy. And it was too cold. I had a bus from Ronkonkoma, New York, which is an hour from here. I was going to drive my car there, jump this bus, and go down with a bunch of patriots. It was too cold. I'd probably be in jail. But just for being there, and they find me face recognition podcast.
Yeah. Well, also from talking to these people, you know, when you find out where they were geographically on that day and you hear their stories, I often thought to myself while I was doing these interviews, if I had been where they were, that would be me. You know,
You're too big.
I would have done the same things that they did, you know, because it was what they did made sense. It was not an act of aggression, you know, and it would have happened to me.
They can't jail you though. See, because you're too big, you have too many connections. You'd have people making films and going, you know, all your buddies and friends in the industry, they'd all come out. They let Nick go.
No, I'm telling you, my friend Jay Johnston, he's you know, worked in the Hollywood for 30 years. Every single one of his friends turned their backs on him. That's what Hollywood's like. They're all cowards. And they all buy the narrative. And if suddenly someone speaks up and says, you know, I'm kind of for Trump, that's it. They just, that person is shunned and they're never spoken of again, except in a disparaging way. I mean, that's what Hollywood's like.
Wow.
They wouldn't stand up for me, Gary.
Huh? Yeah, I will. I know a couple people that would. Now I was going to name them, but now maybe I shouldn't because I was going to name start with the person that put us together that said you got to get Nick. When I started this, you were on my very first show. It was you, Morgan Brittany, the same person that got you for me, got Morgan, and then Burgess Owens, who I knew, and Curtis Bowers, who I knew had done the Agenda films. And this person, I was getting ready to name her, but I maybe I shouldn't. But oh boy, man! But I didn't know it was that bad. Oh, that's terrible.
No, it's that bad. It's that bad.
Oh my God.
I mean, you should. It was just Jay Johnston is somebody you should talk to because his story is really fascinating, and it's like it really shows you what the Hollywood group think is really like.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, speaking of unbelievable, I went on Amazon and I found your book, Justify This, on Amazon, so they haven't shut that down. Please tell people about the book and why you wrote it.
Well, it's a very handy little book. It's right here. It's not that long. It's only about 200 pages. It's not a huge commitment. So, and it's a lot of fun. It mostly is about my career. It's not necessarily a political book, but it's about how some kid from North Carolina who didn't know any actors, I didn't know any professional actors, but I was watching TV when I was about 12 years old, and I thought, I was watching the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and I thought, that looks like fun. I'd like to do that. So that's really, it's about how I made a career out of coming out of North Carolina. So.
I hear you, and you've been a great patriot, Nick. My final question, and this is very important. Please tell America, we talked about how we got here. Please tell America where we're heading, because they're not going to roll over. They're not going to give up. They've come too far. This has been this march towards communism been going on in this nation for over 100 years, and we're gonna have to drive a stake in their heart, wouldn't you say? Because a lot of they won't exhale. It's almost like, okay, I see a woman, I court her, I date her, I court her, I get engaged, then we get married, then you go, I can exhale, it's over. No, that's the start, bro.
That's when the fight
That's
starts.
why marriages mess up. People go, they exhale, it's like, okay, that's it. The work's over. No, now your work begins. And with Trump coming in here right now, and you can see, as you said earlier in the show, they are not backing up one iota. We're going to have to drive a stake through their heart, right?
Right. I mean, they never give up. The left never, even in defeat, they continue to work against you. So I think but I'm hopeful about the next 4 years, because I think for one thing, Trump learned a lot in the first 4 years. And I think he learned a lot about how to operate and who he could trust and who he couldn't. And he's coming into office now with not only with the House and the Senate, but he's also got a team behind him. He's got Elon Musk. He's got Vivek. He's got, Tulsi Gabbard. He's got RFK Jr. He's got all these people that are not necessarily right-wing ideologues by any stretch of the imagination. They're just people with common sense who see what the left was doing with the censorship and the targeting of children and all that stuff. So I think that we're going to enter a period where it's still going to be a fight. Of course, the left is going to squall and cry racism and sexism and all the things that they always do. But I think after you had 4 years of Trump and then you had 4 years of the left, and I think America got a sense of what that is. And a majority of us said, no, we do not want any more of that. So I think Trump is entering at a time when it is possible that he can really move the ball down the field for us quite a distance.
I agree. And you brought up a very interesting point, because when you talk about people like Robert Kennedy Jr. and you talk about Tulsi Gabbard and people along the lines of Elon Musk, you're talking, especially with Tulsi and Kennedy, they were on the other side. They know where the skeletons are buried. They know how they think. They know how they operate. And to have two people who were on the inside, deeply on the inside, running for president as Democrats, they understand the mechanism. They understand the ins and outs and the inner workings and where the money comes from and who the real big players are. So this is like, this is like when you have a football team that's trying to win a Super Bowl and you trade for two all-stars from two other teams that can come in and tell you all the plays.
Yeah, we traded them Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and we got Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk. That's a good trade. I'll take that.
That's a great trade. Hey, Nick, I really appreciate you coming back. You're always welcome to be a guest on the show. Please tell people how they can reach you, how they can get your movie, and how they can get your books, and anything else you'd like to promote.
Well, you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever it is, at Yes Nick Searcy. You can get my book on Amazon. If Amazon is disgusting to you, you can also buy it at Barnes and Noble. And there's an audio book that you can also buy, so you can feel like I read it myself. So I'll be in the same room with you. It'll be very comforting. And then the War on Truth movie, you can find it at warontruthmovie.com. And the first movie that we made, Capital Punishment, is now up on Rumble for free. So Capital Punishment on Rumble, War on Truth at warontruthmovie.com, and Justify This, the book, on Amazon.
Yeah, Nick, I have to tell you this. This is my fourth year, and a lot of people recommend a lot of guests. And you, over the years, have been one of the top 4 names that people said, hey, you got to get Nick Searcy, and there's about 4 or 5 names that keep cropping up, and you're really among them, because people they love you, they know who you are, and they, they consider you a great patriot and a great friend and somebody that loves America. So I thank you for what you do. Keep up the good fight, and please don't let them grind you down.
Thank you, Gary. I've been at it too long. They're not going to get me now.
There you have it, everybody. Mr. Nick Searcy. Please check out his films. Please check out his books, and keep him in your prayers, because he's going for it and he puts the truth out in mega doses. I want to thank Nick Searcy for coming back and taking us from how we got into this mess into how we can get out of this mess. And reelecting Donald Trump is a big, big part of the picture. The battle continues. This war isn't over. The battle of ideologies, the left is not going away. We're just going to have to continue to stand up for God, family, country, Constitution, and take back our nation. So, Nick, we thank you for being at the forefront. Continue to do what you do, and please do not let them grind you down. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcast. Video version you can find at YouTube, Rumble, Conservative Television of America, the God, Family, and Country Television Network, and the Rose Unplugged Media Network. Wherever you go to either listen or to watch, please subscribe, hit the notification button, And we'd like for you to leave us a rating and a review. Tell us what you think about the show. Well, that's it, everyone, until the next time. So thanks for listening. This is your host, Gary Binford, saying God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America.